for me, it had to be its own thing, or it just wasn't for me. And those other movies exist, and they're great, and they're its own thing. We don't need another movie that is like the other movies because they already exist.
First place I learned about death was the Pet Sematary. The secret place. Generation to generation, dead things buried in that land would come back. There's something else.
Lindsey, how's it going?
Good. Nice to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. I like your setup. Is this at home or they got you in actually a junket room?
In a junket room.
Wow.
I wish I had this awesome background though. It's
I know. I like it. It's very contrasting. It's very dark with the poster, but very bright and uplifting behind you.
very geometric.
Well, this film's dark on that way. We can start with that. First of all, it took me a few minutes to recognize that was Jackson White. I was used to him as Steven on Tell Me Lies, creating chaos on campus. Okay, there's a very different version of him in this film.
Yeah, exactly.
Was this? I'm curious. Did you see that show? Was this kind of, or was this film prior to that? Because he's a good actor. I like to see more of him. I felt that this was a good casting.
I have not seen that show because I was warned that it's very smoochy. And I was like, I don't, I know Jackson now. I don't think I want to watch that.
Fair point. Okay, so you got the warning in that case. But you assembled a really good cast here all around. I mean, we got who's names and everything. Was this a list that you had in mind, or everyone just signed on and you got lucky, or you have great, pitching skills? I want to know how you got all these great actors involved.
In terms of the younger actors, that was more of an exploration process. Lots of really talented young actors raised their hands for this role, and so that was more of a traditional watch tons of auditions thing. For the older roles like Duchovny and Henry Thomas and Pam Grier and Samantha Mathis, that was just me thinking of my dream cast and submitting the script to them, and they really raised their hands right away. And I had amazing meetings with each one of them. Duchovny, who I went to because of his work on Californication, I knew he could bring that kind of amazing, like fatherly quality to the role of Bill Baderman. And he is a father, and he really just reacted to the script and felt like there was a lot that rang true to him. And we had a great conversation. And similar thing with Pam Grier. She lives on a ranch, grew up on a ranch. She really related to Marjorie's character and had so many ideas about just like tiny little nuances of Marjorie's character. And that's it. Everything just kind of fell into line right there. But I think part of it is the script was really, really detailed. Not just in terms of the character and the plot, but about production design and cinematography. And I think that they could very much envision the movie in their heads, which makes it easier to sign on.
Mm-hmm. Obviously being a co-writer, not only as a director, and you had a lot of input on this, and your fingerprints are all over this. I was curious when you were writing it, how much did it change on set? Once you got these actors, was there sort of not only give them, I'm not sure if you go by script or you allow actors to kind of improvise too, but how much changed from the writing process to when you were on a set filming for you?
Yeah, for me, I'm an iterative person. I really like to strive to find the not just like what is the version that I wrote, but what is the best version. And so I anywhere I could, if there were things always shift when you find real locations and you have real actors and you see what works and what doesn't. And there's always new opportunities and challenges that come with real life in the real world. And that to me is some of the most fun part because it almost feels like alchemy or magic. It's all kind of coming together and it becomes its own thing.
Mm-hmm. I was kind of surprised because it is a removal from the previous films or others. Did you kind of strive for making this a separate entity or its own sort of, franchise in a sense? Because, the other movies had the Dr. Creed and all that. And this is sort of takes place in the late 60s. It's a different feel to it, too. How much was that a conscious effort for you to just kind of remove that, kind of make it its own in a sense?
Yeah, it was, I mean, for me, it had to be its own thing, or it just wasn't for me. And those other movies exist and they're great and they're its own thing. We don't need another movie that is like the other movies because they already exist. So I wanted to make a prequel to the book. I very much consider it a prequel to the book and not any one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept rereading the book and I wanted to honor its themes and its tones and just tell more about the mythology in the book that's really hinted at but never fully explained in the book or in any of the movies.
Did you actually film it in Maine?
No, I filmed it in Montreal.
Okay. You never know. I'm like thinking like maybe we're going to Maine because it kind of looked like it in that way too. So
Yeah,
Montreal's a great spot though.
it is beautiful.
In terms of that, you were able to recreate kind of the 60s look legitimate to me and tell them I'm now that you're saying Montreal, I'm like, wow, did they had these little sort of towns and this it gave this old school vibe to it. I'm kind of surprised to hear that actually, because Maine would be much easier to recreate that town probably of the 60s, but wow, I'm actually surprised to hear it's Montreal because you made it look like it was an old school American town.
Movie magic.
Literally, yes. You
So,
dressed it up nice. Your set designers and production, good job all around.
no, I mean it takes a lot of effort and care. And one of the things that was important to me is that it looked like actual 60s. It's a pet peeve of mine that things set in the 60s are so stylized and heightened, it doesn't
Mhm.
actually look like the 60s looked.
Yeah.
And not everybody looks like they stepped out of a magazine dressed in 60s clothes. And when I looked at pictures from the 60s in Maine, it had this very grounded feel and so timeless. And that's what I just looked to emulate everywhere.
Yeah. Did you have in mind more to the story since it is sort of a prequel and it predates, even with the times, even of the other films? Do you have more stories for this to kind of go forward? Because it is somewhat open ended, this film, it can totally go on, with these characters that are there still. Do you have ideas for more of this?
I would be lying if I said I didn't have other ideas. There's so much that I'm somebody when I'm coming up with stories, I think so much about people's histories and futures and kind of map it all out. But ultimately that's always up to the fans, right? It's how people respond to it. And if they're looking for more, then maybe Paramount will listen. But for now, all I have is this movie that I am excited to share with everybody, and we go from there.
Hey, it's gonna come out, in Halloween season, which is the movie season for thrillers and horrors. What are some of your favorites? What movie kind of inspired you in terms of horror that you always kind of look back or go on like to draw inspiration, especially for something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't when I was making this, I wasn't looking at any one particular film. I was thinking about Stephen King as a whole.
Mhm.
His stuff is so interesting because it's such a mishmash of genres, and it's got drama and it's got a little comedy and it's scary and it's tense and it's all of those things. And so I wanted to honor just the spirit of Stephen King in this movie. But in terms of me in general as a filmmaker, outside of this outside of this movie, I loved so many horror films growing up. I loved Silence of the Lambs. I loved Seven. I
Mhm.
loved
Good one.
the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I loved the 1989 Pet Sematary. Um, I loved The Birds. I was a big Hitchcock fan. I was kind of a horror fanatic. So I'm not
Yeah,
some
it sounds like it really a mix up too of different
totally,
styles and genres here too.
totally different tones. I like those darker stories.
And I got to wrap by asking you, favorite Stephen. I'm guessing you've read his books. So which one is kind of your favorite that stands out?
It's Pet Sematary has always been my favorite. Yeah.
There you go. Makes sense all around in that case. Well, it was a fun watch. I'm sure many will check it out on Paramount Plus. Very accessible. You can watch from comfort of your own home and get a scare here in Halloween season. So you nailed it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Lindsay. Take care.